The air in the Dolby Theater on February 24th, 2013 is thick with gold dust and manufactured suspense. It is the 85th Academy Awards. On stage, Christopher Plummer opens a crimson envelope. The camera finds Anne Hathaway, her face a perfect porcelain mask of anticipation. She is the overwhelming favorite to win Best Supporting Actress for her soul-bearing performance in Les Misérables. This should be the single greatest moment of her professional life, the culmination of 2 decades of relentless work. The validation of a dream she has held since she was a little girl watching her mother on stage. Plummer announces her name. The room erupts. She smiles, a wide, dazzling, perfectly calibrated smile. She kisses her husband, floats to the stage in a pale pink Prada gown, and accepts the golden statuette. She looks directly into the camera, clutches the Oscar to her chest, and begins her speech with a breathy, earnest, "It came true." It is a perfect moment, too perfect, and in the court of public opinion, that is a cardinal sin. As she delivers her gracious, heartfelt, and meticulously prepared speech, thanking everyone from her co-stars to the film's crew, a strange and toxic phenomenon is coalescing in the nascent world of social media. The hashtag #Hathahate is exploding. On Twitter, in comment sections, on blogs, the consensus is swift and brutal. She is annoying, inauthentic, a theater kid, desperate and cringy. Her sincerity is being interpreted as a performance. Her joy is seen as a calculated act. Her lifelong dream, realized in front of 1 billion people, is being dismissed as just another role she is playing too hard. In the aftermath of her victory, the wave of negativity becomes a tsunami. The New York Times would ask, "Why do women hate Anne Hathaway?" The New Yorker would analyze the Hathaway hating. She had just won the highest honor in her profession, and yet she had become a cultural punching bag. The question that hangs over this bizarre moment is not whether she was a talented actress. That was undeniable. The question is why. Why did a woman who had done everything right, who was professional, prepared, talented, and by all accounts kind, inspire such a powerful and irrational wave of public vitriol? The answer is a complex story about perfectionism, authenticity, and our culture's deeply ambivalent relationship with female ambition. It is the story of a woman who was punished not for her failures but for the very earnestness of her success. To understand the woman who was so thoroughly vilified for being a try-hard, you have to go back to a childhood where trying hard was the family religion. Anne Jacqueline Hathaway was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1982 and raised in Millburn, New Jersey, a leafy, affluent suburb that felt a world away from the gritty Hollywood she would one day conquer. Hers was not a story of tragic Dickensian struggle. Her father, Gerald, was a labor attorney. Her mother, Kate Macaulay Hathaway, was a stage actress. The Hathaway home was a place of stability, intellectual curiosity, and above all, a deep reverence for the craft of performance. Anne grew up in the wings watching her mother perform in productions like the first national tour of Les Misérables, ironically playing the same role, Fantine, that would one day win her daughter an Oscar. She didn't just see the glamour, she saw the work. She saw the rehearsals, the vocal warm-ups, the line memorization, the sheer, grueling discipline required to be a working actor. For Anne, acting was not a frivolous dream of fame. It was a serious, respectable, and almost sacred profession. She was, from her earliest days, a theater kid in the purest sense of the term. She was trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, performed at the esteemed Barrow Group in New York City, and was the first and only teenager ever admitted to their intensive acting program. Her dedication was matched by a prodigious talent. She possessed a powerful soprano voice, a natural comedic timing, and a deep emotional intelligence. But her defining characteristic was her preparation. She was the student who always did her homework, who showed up to auditions with her lines not just memorized but analyzed with a full backstory for her character already worked out in her head. She was, in a word, professional. This professionalism, this almost intimidating level of preparedness, is what landed her the role that would define the first chapter of her career. In 2000, she was a freshman at Vassar College when she auditioned for a Disney film called The Princess Diaries. The story goes that during her audition, she was so nervous that she accidentally fell off her chair. It was that moment of charming, clumsy authenticity that convinced the director, Gary Marshall, that she was the one. She was Mia Thermopolis, the awkward, nerdy high school girl who discovers she is the heir to the throne of a fictional European kingdom. The film, released in 2001, was a massive, unexpected hit. It grossed over $165 million worldwide and turned Anne Hathaway, overnight, into a global teen idol. Her performance was a perfect blend of slapstick comedy and relatable angst. She was the ultimate girl-next-door fantasy, the awkward girl who gets a fairy tale makeover. The role made her a star, but it also created a gilded cage. For the next several years, she was trapped in what would become known as the princess trap. She was America's sweetheart, a Disney princess incarnate, an image that was both a blessing and a curse. It gave her a career, but it also created a very specific, very narrow box. The story of her professional life would become a series of calculated, often risky attempts to break out of that box, to prove to the world and perhaps to herself that she was more than just a princess. It was a fight for legitimacy that would take her to the darkest corners of human experience on screen, and eventually to that paradoxical moment of triumph and humiliation on the Oscar stage. The global success of The Princess Diaries was a double-edged sword. It instantly made Anne Hathaway a household name and a beloved role model for millions of young girls. The film's charm was largely her own. Her ability to blend slapstick physical comedy with a genuinely heartfelt portrayal of teenage awkwardness was a rare gift. Disney, recognizing it had a phenomenon on its hands, moved quickly to capitalize on it. For the next few years, Hathaway became the face of a certain brand of wholesome, intelligent, family-friendly entertainment. She starred in The Other Side of Heaven, the fantasy adaptation Ella Enchanted, and inevitably the 2004 sequel, The Princess Diaries 2, Royal Engagement. This period cemented what is known in Hollywood as the princess trap. Ulol. It's a gilded cage that offers immense fame and financial security, but at a steep artistic price. The industry and the public begins to see the actor and the character as one and the same. You are the princess. You are wholesome, non-threatening, and eternally sweet. For an actress with the training, talent, and ambition of Anne Hathaway, this was a creative straitjacket. The very image that had made her a star was now threatening to suffocate her career before it had truly even begun. She was grateful for the opportunity, but she was acutely aware that if she didn't make a radical move, she would spend the rest of her life playing variations of Mia Thermopolis. So she made a deliberate, calculated, and shocking pivot. In 2005, she launched a two-pronged assault on her own squeaky clean image, choosing two roles that were designed to shatter the princess mold into a million pieces. The first was the gritty, independent drama Havoc. In it, she played Allison Lang, a wealthy, disaffected teenager from Los Angeles who, out of sheer boredom and a misguided search for authenticity, immerses herself in the violent world of East LA gang culture. The role was a 180-degree turn from her Disney persona. It was dark, abrasive, and required full frontal nudity. The decision to appear nude was a conscious and audacious statement. It was Hathaway taking a sledgehammer to her own G-rated image, a declaration to every casting director in Hollywood that she was not a child star anymore. She was a serious, fearless adult actress willing to take immense risks. The second and more critically significant film of her 2005 rebellion was Ang Lee's masterpiece Brokeback Mountain. While her role as Lorene Newsom, the brassy Texan wife of Jake Gyllenhaal's Jack Twist, was a supporting part, it was in one of the most culturally important and critically acclaimed films of the decade. Her performance was a marvel of subtle transformation. We first meet Lorene as a vibrant, fast-talking rodeo queen, a whirlwind of blonde ambition. But over the course of the film, as she becomes aware of her husband's secret life and the hollowness of their marriage, she hardens. By her final scene, a tense, heartbreaking phone call with Ennis Del Mar, Heath Ledger, she is a different woman entirely. Her voice is clipped and cold, her eyes are like steel, her warmth replaced by a brittle corporate efficiency. In just a few scenes, she convincingly portrayed a woman's entire life of disappointment and curdled ambition. It was a performance that proved she could not only hold her own alongside powerhouse actors, but could also master complex, nuanced character work. The 1-2 punch of Havoc and Brokeback Mountain worked. The industry was forced to reconsider Anne Hathaway. She had proven her range and her courage. The princess trap had been sprung. Now she needed a vehicle that could merge her girl-next-door appeal with her newfound maturity and dramatic chops. She found it in the script for The Devil Wears Prada. Released in 2006, The Devil Wears Prada was a cultural phenomenon that cemented Hathaway's status as a true A-list star. Her role as Andy Sachs, the earnest, intelligent journalism graduate who takes a job as the assistant to the tyrannical fashion magazine editor Miranda Priestly, was a perfect fit. The character's journey mirrored Hathaway's own in many ways. Like Andy, Hathaway was a good girl, a serious, prepared intellectual trying to succeed in the cynical, often cruel world of a powerful industry. Her performance was a triumph of comedic timing and relatable vulnerability. The audience rooted for her, felt her humiliations, and cheered her eventual triumph. The film was also a trial by fire, as it meant going head-to-head with a living legend. Meryl Streep. Streep, in an iconic Oscar-nominated performance as Miranda, famously employed a method approach, maintaining her icy, distant persona even when the cameras weren't rolling. She wanted her co-stars to feel the genuine chill of Miranda's authority. For Hathaway, a lifelong admirer of Streep, this was initially terrifying. But she rose to the occasion. Instead of shrinking, she used her character's intimidation to fuel her performance. The on-screen dynamic between the powerful boss and the striving assistant felt real because, in many ways, it was. The film was a massive commercial and critical success, grossing over $326 million worldwide. It was her graduation. She had successfully navigated the treacherous transition from teen idol to a sophisticated, respected, and immensely likable leading lady. With the success of Prada as her new foundation, Hathaway spent the next few years solidifying her credentials as a versatile and serious actress. In Becoming Jane, 2007, she took on the formidable challenge of portraying the beloved author Jane Austen. She dove into the role with her signature meticulous preparation, mastering a flawless English accent and immersing herself in Austen's letters and novels. While the film received mixed reviews, her performance was widely praised for its intelligence and emotional depth. She proved she could carry a period drama with grace and conviction. She balanced this with continued commercial success in films like the action comedy Get Smart, 2008, demonstrating a savvy ability to navigate both art and commerce. She had successfully escaped the princess trap. She had proven her dramatic range and her box office appeal. She was now a respected A-list star, admired for her talent, her professionalism, and her seemingly flawless public image. But the higher she climbed, the more visible she became, and the more the public began to scrutinize the very perfectionism, that had engineered her rise. The stage was being set for her first Oscar nomination, and for the first time, faint whispers of the bizarre cultural backlash that was to come. Anne Hathaway's journey from a popular leading lady to a critically revered actress reached its first major peak in 2008 with Jonathan Demme's Rachel Getting Married. The film was a raw, searing, and often uncomfortable family drama, shot in a quasi-documentary style that left no room for artifice. For the central role of Kim Buchman, a recovering drug addict on a weekend pass from rehab to attend her sister's wedding, Hathaway didn't just take on the role, she disappeared into it, shedding every last vestige of her movie star glamour and her girl-next-door likability. Kim is one of the most abrasive and challenging characters in modern cinema. She is narcissistic, manipulative, deeply wounded, and possesses a breathtaking talent for saying the exact wrong thing at the exact wrong time. She is a vortex of pain, sucking the air out of every room she enters. It was a role that required an actress to be utterly fearless, to embrace the character's ugliness without asking for the audience's sympathy. Hathaway's performance was a revelation. With no glamorous makeup, her hair unkempt, she dove into the depths of Kim's narcissistic pain. Her long, rambling, and often cruel speeches at the rehearsal dinner are a masterclass in controlled chaos. You see the desperate child lashing out, the addict's selfishness, and the profound grief over a family tragedy for which she holds herself responsible. The performance stunned the industry. It was a radical departure from anything she had done before, proving that beneath the polished exterior was an actress of immense depth and power. She received widespread critical acclaim, culminating in her first-ever Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. She was now officially in the same league as the Meryl Streeps and Kate Winslets of the world. She had achieved the artistic legitimacy she had fought for since she first decided to break free from the princess trap. But just as her professional life was reaching this new pinnacle, her personal life was about to implode in a spectacularly public fashion. For 4 years, Hathaway had been in a high-profile relationship with an Italian real estate developer named Raffaello Folieri. On the surface, it was a fairy tale romance. He was handsome, charming, and they led a glamorous, jet-setting life, often involved in charitable work through Folieri's foundation. But in June 2008, just as she was preparing for the release of Rachel Getting Married, the fairy tale shattered. Folieri was arrested and charged with 14 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The shocking truth emerged. He was a con artist who had defrauded investors of millions by falsely claiming to have connections to the Vatican in order to buy church properties on the cheap. He had used the ill-gotten money to fund their lavish lifestyle. The scandal was a media firestorm, and Hathaway was caught in the crossfire. It was a moment of profound personal humiliation, her private life and her judgment laid bare for public consumption. In a move that demonstrated a steely resolve, she immediately broke off the relationship and fully cooperated with the FBI, even turning over Folieri's personal diaries, which she had been keeping at her apartment. She handled the crisis with a quiet, dignified professionalism, refusing to speak about it publicly and instead focusing on her work. While this was an act of immense personal strength, it may have inadvertently contributed to a growing public perception of her as being cool, distant, or calculating. In the messy world of celebrity, her no-drama approach was, for some, less relatable than a more emotional public breakdown would have been. She weathered the storm of the Folieri scandal, and her Oscar nomination proved that her talent was undeniable. She continued to work, balancing commercial hits with artistically ambitious projects. But in 2011, she made a decision that would prove to be a major turning point in her public narrative, a moment that crystallized the very qualities that the public was beginning to turn against. She agreed to co-host the 83rd Academy Awards. The producer's idea was to attract a younger audience by pairing two of the hottest young stars in Hollywood, Hathaway and James Franco. On paper, it seemed like a fresh, modern choice. In execution, it was one of the most disastrous hosting performances in Oscar history. The failure was a fundamental mismatch of energy and intent. Hathaway, the consummate professional and lifelong theater kid, approached the job with the earnest, unbridled enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved the Oscars and was thrilled to be there. She had prepared meticulously. She sang, she danced, she gave it her all. Franco, on the other hand, approached it with a detached, slacker-like irony. He seemed bored, aloof, and at times stoned, as if he was participating in a sociological experiment rather than hosting a major awards show. The on-stage chemistry was non-existent. It was oil and water. Her high-energy, let's put on a show vibe crashed against his low energy, I'm too cool for this posture. The broadcast was a cringe-inducing parade of awkward moments and failed jokes. The critics were savage, and the public was even more so. But the blame was not shared equally. Franco, with his detached irony, was largely given a pass. He was seen as being above it all. Hathaway, however, bore the brunt of the criticism. Her earnestness was widely mocked. Her enthusiasm was seen as cringy. She was, once again, the try-hard, the eager student in a room full of cool kids. The Oscar hosting gig was a pivotal moment. It was the first time that the Hathahate phenomenon, which had been simmering in online forums, truly broke through into the mainstream. It established a narrative that would follow her for years. That her sincerity was a performance. That she was fundamentally inauthentic. The very qualities that had defined her from childhood, her preparation, her professionalism, her genuine love for her craft, were now being weaponized against her. She was being punished not for being a bad actress, but for appearing to be a bad celebrity, one who cared too much in an era that was beginning to value effortless, ironic detachment above all else. She had no idea that this public trial was merely a dress rehearsal for the even bigger storm that was just over the horizon. In the wake of the Oscar hosting debacle, Anne Hathaway did what she had always done. She put her head down and went back to work, determined to let the quality of her performances speak for itself. The year 2012 would become the apex of her career, a year in which she delivered two vastly different, iconic performances in two of the most anticipated films of the decade. It was a year that should have been an undisputed triumph. Instead, it became the year she reached the summit, only to be pushed off the cliff by an unprecedented wave of public negativity. Her first challenge was stepping into one of the most legendary roles in comic book history. Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, in Christopher Nolan's epic conclusion to his Batman trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises. The pressure was immense. The role had been unforgettably defined by the purring, dangerous portrayals of Eartha Kitt and Michelle Pfeiffer. Hathaway, still seen by many as the sweet Princess Mia, was an unexpected choice. But she threw herself into the part with her signature ferocious dedication. She underwent a grueling physical transformation, enduring months of intensive stunt work, martial arts training, and a strict diet to achieve the sleek, athletic physique required to fit into the catsuit and perform the film's demanding action sequences. Her portrayal of Selina Kyle was a masterstroke of intelligence and ambiguity. She was not a campy villainess. Her Catwoman was a sleek, cynical, and pragmatic cat burglar, a product of a cruel world, whose shifting allegiances and morally gray worldview made her one of the most compelling characters in the film. She was witty, dangerous, and possessed a cool, self-assured confidence that was a world away from the earnestness of her public persona. The performance was a global smash hit, proving she could command the screen in a massive blockbuster and silence the doubters who questioned her casting. but it was her second role of 2012 that would demand not just her physical, but her complete and utter emotional and psychological surrender. It was the role her mother had once played on stage, the role that seemed to be her destiny. Fantine in Tom Hooper's epic musical adaptation of Les Misérables. Fantine is one of the most tragic figures in literature, a beautiful young woman who is abandoned by her lover, loses her job, is forced into prostitution, sells her hair and her teeth, and ultimately dies of consumption, all in a desperate attempt to provide for her young daughter Cosette. The role is short, but it is the emotional core of the entire story. To prepare, Hathaway embarked on a dangerous and radical physical transformation, losing an additional 25 pounds on a near-starvation diet of dried oatmeal paste to achieve Fantine's emaciated, sickly appearance. It was a physically grueling process that left her feeling profoundly unwell, but she believed it was necessary to honor the character's suffering. The centerpiece of the role is the iconic solo, "I Dreamed a Dream," a gut-wrenching ballad of lost innocence and broken promises. Director Tom Hooper made the radical decision to record all the film's vocals live on set, rather than having the actors lip-sync to a pre-recorded track. This meant the performances would be raw, immediate, and incredibly vulnerable. There would be no studio magic to fix a cracked note or a shaky breath. For an actor, it is the ultimate high-wire act. Hathaway's performance of that song, filmed in a single unbroken take with the camera pushed in tight on her face, is one of the most courageous and devastating moments in modern musical cinema. It is not a pretty performance. As she sings, real tears stream down her face. Her voice cracks with raw, unvarnished pain. Her eyes are filled with the ghosts of a life that has been stolen from her. The moment where she has her long, beautiful hair brutally shorn off on camera is not a trick. It is real. It is a moment of irreversible sacrifice, a physical manifestation of her complete submission to the character. This performance was the absolute pinnacle of her try-hard ethos, a testament to her total, almost frightening commitment. Her work as Fantine was a tour de force, and the industry recognized it immediately. As the 2012 to 2013 awards season began, she became the unstoppable frontrunner. She won the Golden Globe. She won the Screen Actors Guild Award. She won the BAFTA. She won every major precursor award for Best Supporting Actress. And with each victory, something strange and ugly began to happen. The public, particularly in the echo chamber of early social media, started to turn on her. This was the birth of the Hathahate phenomenon. Her acceptance speeches, which were always polished, gracious, and articulate, were dissected and mocked. She would often begin with a breathy, seemingly surprised, "Oh, thank you," that to an increasingly cynical public read as false modesty. They saw a woman who knew she was going to win pretending to be surprised. Her sincerity was interpreted as a performance. Her heartfelt thank yous were seen as a calculated checklist. She was too perfect, too polished, too eager to please. She was, once again, the theater kid who just cared too much. The media piled on with articles and blog posts analyzing this bizarre cultural moment. The narrative took hold. Anne Hathaway was inauthentic. It was a deeply misogynistic and paradoxical critique. She was being criticized for the very qualities that made her a great actress. Her preparation, her precision, her ability to deliver a flawless performance. But in the context of an acceptance speech, those same qualities were seen as a character flaw. She had broken the unspoken rule of celebrity. You can be successful, but you must make it look effortless. Anne Hathaway, in her earnest joy and gratitude, made the mistake of showing the world just how much she had worked for it and just how much she cared. This brings us back to that night at the Dolby Theater. When she walked to the stage to accept her Oscar, she was not just an actress accepting an award. She was a woman who had been enduring a months-long public flogging for the crime of being herself. She later confessed the reality of that moment in an interview. "I felt very uncomfortable," she said. "I kind of lost my mind doing that movie and it hadn't come back yet. I had to stand up there and feel something I don't feel, which is uncomplicated happiness. It's an obvious thing. You win an Oscar and you're supposed to be happy. I didn't feel that way. I felt wrong that I was standing there in a gown that cost more than some people will see in their lifetime, and winning an award for portraying pain that still felt very much a part of our collective experience as human beings." The Oscar win was the peak of her professional life, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. It was the moment her greatest triumph and her greatest public humiliation converged. She had won everything, and she felt nothing. The emotional climax of her story was not a moment of joy, but a moment of profound and painful disillusionment. In the immediate aftermath of her Oscar win at the absolute pinnacle of her profession, Anne Hathaway made a decision that was both radical and necessary for her survival. She disappeared. Instead of capitalizing on her victory with a string of high-profile roles, she consciously and strategically retreated from the public eye. The toxicity of the Hathahate phenomenon had taken a profound personal toll. "I was in crisis," she would later admit. "I had a certain level of fame, and I was the it girl, and I felt like I was being hunted. It was a really scary feeling." She understood with a painful clarity that her public image had become toxic. In a 2017 interview, she reflected on the moment she Googled herself after the Oscars. The first thing that came up was an article that said, "Why does everybody hate Anne Hathaway?" Instead of fighting it, she decided to remove herself from the equation. She turned her focus inward, marrying actor and jewelry designer Adam Schulman in a quiet private ceremony, and in the following years starting a family. This period was not a retirement. It was a tactical and emotional regrouping. It was an act of self-preservation, a deliberate choice to step off the relentless treadmill of celebrity and reconnect with a sense of normalcy and a life away from the unforgiving glare of the public gaze. Her gradual return to the screen was a masterclass in strategic image rehabilitation. She moved away from the kind of emotionally demanding, awards bait roles that required her to campaign and expose her earnestness to the public. Instead, she chose smart, interesting projects with great directors that allowed her to showcase her talent without having to sell her personality. She worked with Christopher Nolan again in the ambitious sci-fi epic Interstellar 2014, playing a pragmatic, intelligent astronaut. The role was serious but not overwrought, showcasing her skill in a more restrained ensemble context. Then came the film that marked the true turning of the tide, Nancy Meyers' charming and wildly successful comedy, The Intern, 2015. In it, she played Jules Austin, a driven, successful, and deeply empathetic founder of a fashion e-commerce site. The role was a perfect vehicle for her comeback. It harnessed all of her best qualities, her warmth, her intelligence, her comedic timing, in a character that was impossible to dislike. The film was a massive box office hit, grossing nearly $200 million worldwide. The public, it seemed, was ready to love Anne Hathaway again. But the true genius of her comeback, the moment that signaled the beginning of what fans would call the Hathasance, was her role in the 2018 heist comedy Ocean's 8. She played Daphne Kluger, a vain, narcissistic, and hilariously insecure movie star. The role was a brilliant, self-aware satire of the very annoying actress stereotype that had been used against her. She leaned into the caricature, playing it with a perfect blend of comedic timing and a subtle wink to the audience. In one memorable scene, she breaks down in tears, wailing about how the public scrutinizes her every move. It was a moment of pure meta-genius. By bravely and humorously satirizing her own public image, she took control of the narrative. She was in on the joke, and by inviting the audience to laugh with her, she defanged the criticism completely. As Hathaway was strategically rebuilding her career, the culture itself was changing. The very things she had been criticized for in 2013 were now being seen in a new light. The rise of the Me Too movement and a broader cultural conversation about misogyny led many to re-examine the Hathahate phenomenon. People began to question why a successful, ambitious, and prepared woman had been subjected to such intense vitriol, while her male co-host who had put in visibly less effort was largely spared. Her earnestness was no longer seen as cringy, but as genuine passion. Her professionalism was no longer seen as inauthentic, but as a testament to her work ethic. The public re-evaluation was widespread, with articles and social media posts now championing her and expressing regret for the earlier wave of negativity. The world, it seemed, had finally caught up to Anne Hathaway. The story of Anne Hathaway is a uniquely 21st century celebrity narrative. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of online mob mentality, the fickle nature of public opinion, and our culture's deeply complicated relationship with female ambition. Unlike the tragic figures of Hollywood's past, who were often destroyed by the pressures of fame, Hathaway survived her public trial by fire. She possessed the emotional intelligence, the stable support system, and the self-awareness to understand what was happening, and to make the strategic choice to step away and let the storm pass. Her legacy is not just her impressive and versatile filmography, from fairy tale princess to Oscar-winning martyr to chic con artist. Her legacy is one of resilience. She is a case study in how to weather a bizarre and vicious cultural storm and emerge on the other side not just intact, but stronger, more self-aware, and ultimately triumphant on her own terms. She did not change to fit the world's expectations. She waited patiently and professionally for the world to change its perception of her. She proved that the most authentic act of all is to simply continue doing the work. To let your talent be your truth and to have the last laugh. The girl who was punished for trying too hard had won, not by trying less, but by trying smarter.